I'm going to take you to a special place now in this next part of the book. This place is a place that is very well thought of in my mind in terms of feelings of happiness, safety, love, contentment. It's a place that many Catholics hold dear to their hearts, and Catholic families and Catholic groups often will go to on pilgrimages. And my family and the disabilities group was no exception to that. We made frequent trips to this place in France where candles would be lit, hymns would be sung, prayers would be said, and water would heal something. Within the grounds of this place was a beautiful church that stood high up, overlooking the long stretch of grass where the statue of Our Lady stood. The place I'm describing to you is called Lourdes. Lourdes to me became a home away from home. And Lourdes was well renowned with, and is still, with the Catholic faith and pilgrimages, because it was believed that Bernadette was guided by Our Lady to dig a well there where she would find water that would heal. Now, the reason I talk about this place with such positive feelings is because this was a place where I suppose my first experience of grief interlinked with all the others, because this was a place that Barbara loved. And if you can remember from reading my other chapters, Barbara is where the grief started, and Barbara intertwines with all the other grief that has gone after. One of Barbara's last trips was to Lourdes, and this was memories where I had of me spending a lot of time with her, almost as though I did have that sense that something was going to change. And Lourdes always held a special place in my heart, and it does to this day. When I've gone back, it evokes feelings of painful sorrow, but yet still that feeling of joy. Two emotions that collide and can at times be exhausting. And that's another reflection, while we're on this journey still, that grief can give. It's a reflection that grief can have so many emotions balled up into one that collide in your mind and in your heart and in your body, that it leaves you exhausted. So it is important you have these places you can go to. And I'm not saying you all have to put this book down and book a plane and book a ticket and hop on a plane and go to somewhere like Lourdes. That doesn't have to happen. That place where you can feel all those jumbled up, messed up, strange feelings can be anywhere. Again, as long as it's not harming you or the people around you. You can create your own space in your room. It can be a space in a park near where you live. Anything that you know would help, that can be your space. Lourdes still is a special place in my heart, and it continues to be. And it was no different back in 2008 and 2009. Now, by this point, I'm 15 years old. I have tried to navigate the best I can already. 3 funerals, 3 different layers of grief, 3 different experiences of grief. by the age of 16, I was going to experience 2 more. And these 2 were different from the rest again. One had lived a long life, and one had time taken away. And it was the one that had time taken away that brings me back to Lourdes. Because Lourdes gave me a special memory for... Scrap that line, a special memory for. And it brings me back again to Lourdes. Because in Lourdes, in 2009, at the age of 16, the group again went on a pilgrimage. We went over, we all flew. The logistics must have been a nightmare for my parents and friends of them to try and organise this big group of people with varying needs, varying conditions, along with their own children who were teenagers, organising transport. All of it must have been so much to try and manage. And whilst we were in Lourdes, I was still grappling with... scrap that grappling. I was still grappling with the loss of Barbara. And again, it all comes back to this first experience of grief, because I was still trying to deal with that experience of grief, even though by this point I was 16. 4 years had passed. But because of the various funerals after Barbara that I talked about before, it felt like less than 4 years, because again, Barbara had to be put on hold. And it was nobody's fault. But it had to be put to the back. But whilst in Lourdes at the age of 16, as well as the logistics of trying to get us all there, my parents were aware there was a member of the group who came with us, and they would be coming with us for the last time. This person was good friends with my parents, so my parents must have been feeling that grief too. They had already had to try and grieve Barbara, but now they knew that somebody who was coming with us, who I won't name because I don't feel it's right to, this particular person, was at the end of their life. Cancer had come, and cancer had given them time and taken time away from them. Now, while I was in Lourdes at the age of 16, I was navigating still these strong feelings of not understanding and still being angry. And because Lourdes was such a special place for me, and I knew it was for Barbara, and it was for all of us going, it evokes stronger feelings than back home. There's a particular hymn that's sung in Lourdes called As I Kneel Before You. And it's often sung during the torchlight. And the torchlight is a really special time in Lourdes where those who have come on pilgrimage will walk around the long stretch of grass, around the statue of Our Lady, and hold up candles whilst they sing the chorus of As I Kneel Before You. And this song, still to this day, will evoke a very strong emotional reaction from me. There's 2 reasons, really. The first is because it was played at Barbara's funeral, but the second is because there is something about the atmosphere of being in that torchlight that creates a strong emotional response. And on this particular trip, in this particular year, in 2009, it was no different. But I also had an added layer, because during these trips, me, my brother, and our friends all were there to also help push wheelchairs, to help support those with the different physical and learning needs, and to understand what it was like to support those people in a place that was away from home. And even though we were still young ourselves and we were of course supported by our incredible parents, it gave us a real opportunity to understand how to support those with additional needs whilst having support from our parents doing this. And one of the people that we supported was this lady whose life was coming to an end. And we would take it in turns to push her around when she needed that, to support her in any way we could, to just chat with her, because she knew us all quite well. And there was a particular moment where I was pushing the wheelchair and I was talking to her and she was talking to me, and I had a bit of a Wednesday Adam moment again. This realization, this light bulb, this, oh my gosh, I'm still feeling grief because I know this lady that I'm pushing, that my parents are close to, and that I am chatting to, and I've known for a while, this will be the last time. This will be the last trip that I see her and talk to her as she is now, before she dies. And that was quite powerful for me. And I suppose what it did was realign grief again for me, and it made it feel like it was turned on its head all over again. Because for a split second, and for those few moments when I was chatting to her, I felt a little bit of joy that I was getting to spend time with her. Now, as you've read before, that's a bit juxtaposed, right? From my other reflections, when I said, when people say at least you've got time, it makes me angry, and it does. But for this split second, I had joy that I had a bit of time, even though this person didn't have time. I had time with her. And that created a whole nother layer of confusion in my brain. And it created a layer of just murkiness where I was trying to dredge through, pull myself through all this mud and silt and thinking, I don't get this. And we're going to go to another reflection now. I don't get this. Because often we try and make sense of grief. We try and rationalize it. We try and understand. We try and think why, how. And that can drive us insane. That can make us lose our minds with pain and just unending questions. And this was the first time that I realized maybe I'm never going to understand. And that's the reflection on this. Maybe we're never going to understand, and maybe you won't understand. And if you're reading this and you know a loved one has limited time, or you're grieving someone who was given limited time, and you're thinking, I don't get it. Or you're grieving somebody who went very quickly with no warning, and they were fine the day before, they were fine the week before. You're thinking, how? Why? Those questions are normal, and they're part of the process, but there's something we need to all learn to go, we don't have all the answers. We're never going to know why. And you see, that's what happened to me in Lords. At that age of 16, pushing that person in the wheelchair. Why? And again, the realization of maybe I'm not going to know why. Now, I hope I'm making sense, because I tend to, when I write, go from one thing to the other, and I'm trying to keep things linear. But again, as I've said before, with grief, and the point of this book to not always be linear, is to get the message across that grief isn't linear. There's no set way that it goes. It's messy and it's strange and it makes no sense whatsoever. So a few months later, after I'd pushed this person in the chair, after I'd had the Wednesday Addams moment of there can be joy when there's going to be grief coming, after I was still wrestling with the why and starting to understand a little bit of not giving that too much thought, and it's okay to not know, we were at another funeral. Not long before this one, we'd been to another one. And you're probably all thinking as you read this, yeah, right, pull another one. But it's truth, and this book is full of truth and honesty. So by this point, I was on my 5th funeral. My family was on their 5th funeral. My parents a little bit more than that. So by this 5th one, I was burnt out. I was confused and tired and not really understanding why all these people kept going. And earlier in the last chapter you read, I talked about meerkats and how I'd need more. Well, those meerkats started to appear very quickly after this last funeral. Suddenly I was joined by 10 and they were all keeping watch. And I knew that there might have been more on the way, but I wasn't sure when. So these meerkats had to work extra hard. They had to be extra alert, extra on guard. They had to stand day and night 24/7. Which means I had to make sure I was switched on. I had to make sure I was ready for that being told. Being told this was going to happen, that somebody was going to die. Being told that somebody had. And by this point as well, I'd had a phone. I got given a phone. So I'd had a phone from the age of 12 anyway. But at this point, I was starting to use my phone more. I was starting to be social. I was starting to text. I was starting to have numbers in there. I was starting to do all those things more than I was before. So there was kind of another meerkat added as well. Because this other meerkat was almost on like a technology lookout meerkat. Scan for a phone call. Scan for a text. Oh, a text goes off. A phone call goes. Right. Be alert, because it could be. It could be. And every phone call from a family member or a text, or most phone calls, shall we say, scrap that last line. And most of the time, when I got a text or a phone call from a family member, I would be heightened with anxiety because I was thinking I'm going to be told that somebody else has died. Now, before the age of 16, I was on alert anyway, but I was on alert a bit less because I would go to myself, you're overreacting here, Matthew, because there's not going to be more for a while. You'll be okay. But by the age of 16, that thought, that rationale had well boarded the train and had gone into the distance and was not coming back. Instead, stepping off on the next train on the platform was the rationale of, No, there's going to be loads more. You need to be on guard even more. You need to be even more anxious and even more meerkat mode. Because they're going to come even more. And I knew they were. And I was scared at this point too, because I still hadn't dealt with that first one, that pivotal one, that one that was most impactful at this point in time. Because I felt like I didn't have time. I didn't have time when my friend lost his father. I didn't have time with the member of the group who passed away shortly afterwards. I didn't have time when I was in Lourdes pushing the wheelchair. I didn't have time afterwards when we were at the funeral. I couldn't stand there or walk. I was pushing this wheelchair and talking to the person and sobbing about Barbara. That couldn't happen. And also, I had to be there for my parents. I had to be there for everybody else. I had to keep it together. And no one made me feel like that. No one told me to be like that. Nobody put any of that into my head. That was simply my way, my brain of dealing with that. And that's another reflection. And the last reflection for this chapter is grief is very powerful on your mindset, and it can have powerful effects. And it's important to tune into that. And actually, at the time when it's happening, you can't always tune into that. So it might be that we have to just take that step and say to somebody, I'm really struggling here. Maybe it could be your friend and you go, I'm really struggling. I'm trying to hold it together for my parents, for my family. And I don't know how to do that anymore. Maybe you need support from somebody else in your family to speak to the person you're holding it together for. Maybe they sit with you when you're talking to this person and say, I'm here to support them because they feel like this. And it's not doing it as a name and blame. It's not going in there going, you've made me feel like this. It's going in there and going, this is how I feel. And it's having that open conversation. Because grief is so powerful that we all need to talk about it more to help us comfort each other more. Now, I'm not saying any of these things are going to take it away, as I've said before in other chapters, but they help. I feel anyway. You may not. Now, luckily, there's going to be a year reprieve. So, by this point, when you're 3 chapters in, if you need to, grab yourself a cup of tea. Get yourself a drink. Take a breather. Go for a walk. Do what you need to do. Because what you've read so far has probably been quite heavy. And then come back. And you'll see what would happen the year after. That you probably get the gist by now.